And I actually meant to put in through the end of the chapter, which would actually be 36. And I didn't pay attention to what I typed, I guess, and then I started doing questions and got down to about question 10 or 11. I actually got to 11, and I thought, we're not going to get past this in any way. And it actually was verse 26. And so I looked back at the top because I was going to change the text at the top, and it already said 26. So it kind of felt like maybe that's where we were supposed to stop. So that's where we are. Yeah.
Before you start this, can you answer the question you asked us to look up?
Can I answer it? Yeah. Well, you're supposed to answer it.
I couldn't find it. I could not find where Paul asked anybody if they had been saved.
If y'all remember,
he preached on being saved, but I never could find where he actually asked anybody if they were saved.
So the question last week was, did Paul ask anyone if they were saved? Did anybody other than Mary kind of spend some time looking at that? Or
the question I thought you were asking. Verse 11, who in the we and the are is.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, we answered that last week, I think. Well, we kind of didn't, but did, maybe.
You said who was the we and who they are.
Yeah. No, the one I asked you to look at for the week was, did Paul ask anyone if they were saved?
What was I doing that time?
He was on that pew right there.
After Mary talked about it yesterday, I looked.
Anybody else find it anywhere? Yeah, he does not present to anyone that I know of anywhere, anyway, the question, are you saved? He will say that if you believe, you will be saved, but he doesn't say, are you saved? And the reason we asked that question was sometimes we go into the world today and we will ask someone, well, are you saved? Well, depending on their understanding of the word saved, you can really get an answer that is not right at all about what you're asking. And you may get a question of saved from what? Because saved carries a connotation of so many things. If you go back into Old Testament, you find that the Israelites were saved from many different things, but it wasn't salvation in terms of being in right standing with God. So they were saved, but not from their sin. So Paul doesn't, that I know of anywhere, Paul doesn't ask the question, are you saved? He confronts people. He actually asked them one time, did you receive the Holy Spirit? That was the put forth question that he asked. Did you receive the Holy Spirit? Which would be a sign of Christ's salvation. And that individual actually had not. Apollos was the individual he was talking to about that. And they had not. And that's an interesting study too. We won't go into that. But he doesn't ask, are you saved? And so we have to be careful in our terminology. That was the whole reason for that last week. We have to be careful in our terminology about what we ask, because we may get the answer to our question, but it may not be the real answer that we're actually looking for. So we have to go beyond the surface level questions, and we have to get to more of the depth, which is what Paul did when he said, have you received, or did you receive the Holy Spirit? So we just have to keep that in mind, especially as we get more and more into a non-church affiliated people that we live in and among. So
many people ask, are you a Christian?
Yeah.
They don't say saved, but are you a Christian?
Yeah, and that, depending on how you interpret Christian, that can be a varying, statement as well, because some people say, well, I believe in Christ. And well, okay, what does that mean? Because just because you believe, Satan himself believes. So he believes in Christ. He doesn't follow him, but he believes he exists. So you have to, it's one of those things where we have to really get interested in a person's life and be willing to ask the harder questions to really get to the root of the answer in life. All right, let's look at John chapter 3, verse 16. It says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, But whoever does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. And this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his works should be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his works have been carried out in God. After this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside, and he remained there with them and was baptizing. John also was baptizing at Aenon near Salem, because water was plentiful there, and people were coming and being baptized, for John had not yet been put in prison. This is interesting. Verse 24 is somewhat interesting. It serves as a marker for chronologically where they are on the timeline, because remember, John's writing about this years after it has occurred, so he's writing in retrospect. So he's giving us a timeline marker. John's not been arrested yet. He's still out here baptizing. Verse 25, now a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him. And I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick up from there next week, I guess. And it's kind of in the middle of a thought because we don't get John's answer, but I didn't really want to get into John's answer today, so we'll do that next week. So let's look at verse 1, going to John 3:16, common verse. Most everyone probably knows it. What?
You just messed that all up.
What?
It said starting at verse 1, we're going through chapter 16.
Question 1, verse 16. Thank you, Mary. From verse 16, what do we define? What do we see defined as the true pattern for love towards others? And then based on Romans 5:8, what was the timing of this love that God showed? So what do we see defined as the true pattern for love toward others? Because we talk about, and this word love and the phrase, love you guys or love you is thrown around in the world today like anything else. And sometimes, because the word love has many different connotations, we have to really talk about what love is, because we use it in ways that really we should use the word like instead of love, probably, at its pure definition. So what do we see defined as the true pattern for love towards others out of this verse?
Well, Jesus was willing to die for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, we were supposed to be like Jesus. So I would say willing to die for him.
So willingness to die for others, okay?
I think it's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Give all.
Give all,
And God gave his only son. That right there is a big sacrifice.
okay? God gave his only son. When you look, it says, for God so loved the world, and we talked, I think, a couple of weeks ago when we preached through this about that word so is extremely important because it talks of the magnitude of his love. And he so loved the world that he gave his only son. So we see that the definition of love here is that God gave something. He sacrificed, as we said. He sacrificed something. Now, Christ's example of love is, number one, he was obedient to God his Father. So we find an obedience through that love also carries with it an obedience. But we also find that Christ was willing to suffer the death for everyone else. So there was a follow-through of a sacrifice there as well. So in both sense, whether from God's perspective or Jesus' perspective, we find sacrifice involved in that show of love. Now, how does that...
And God loved us even when we were sinners.
That's right. Yeah, before, and
Remember that happened. Different people.
Now, didn't Jesus know what was going to happen to him when he came here?
yes.
So he went ahead. See, that's another sacrifice, to know what's going to happen, and you do it anyway. Because you love somebody enough to actually go through what he went through, knowing that you're going to have to.
Do we ever know of of something that we might have to go through if we do this for someone else. So I'm going to paraphrase this down to this. If we show love for someone, do we ever know that we're going to have to go through a difficulty? And does that change our decision about whether we're going to do it or not? Do we know we're going to have to sacrifice something before we do it?
Marriage.
Which, is it today that it's 51 years? Sunday is 51 years. But she's right. There is, I mean, yeah, you don't. And I don't know that we teach that well enough, like beforehand. We talk about it. I don't know if we teach it well enough, but there is a sacrifice in marriage that has to occur. And it's a sacrifice on both, it has to be a sacrifice on both parts for it to work. But then there also has to be both sacrificing, if they're going to have a godly marriage, sacrificing unto serving God as well. So it's absolutely, it's funny, but it's absolutely right.
That reminds me of the funny I saw this morning. Husband came into his wife and said, "I think it's time for you to embrace your mistakes." So she hugged him.
Maybe we need to do a marriage class or something. I don't know. Let me put a scenario out. Let's say that church is going to take up a love offering for a missionary that is in need. I'm not talking about just hey, let's send money to a missionary, but we know there's a need, and the church says we're going to take up an offering for them. What goes into deciding whether you're going to give or not? One, do you see the need, right? Because if you see the need, you know it exists. What goes in after that?
Can you do without the money you're going to give?
So can you do without the money that you're going to give? Is that a sacrifice? Mm-hmm. What if we said, instead of, well, I've got this money in my pocket, I don't know what I'm going to spend it on, so I'll go ahead and give it to them. What if we said in our heart, you know, I really like Mountain Dew and cereal, so I'll give those two things up for the next week or month or whatever it may be, and whatever I would have spent on those, I'll give in this offering, but I do it beforehand. I'm going to sacrifice it in order to give it. Thanks. Do we ever think with that mindset? Because that would truly be sacrificing, right? That would be loving and sacrificing in the same way. Do we do that?
Probably not.
Take it outside of church. When we think about helping someone else, do we think about what we can sacrifice to help an individual that actually needs something? Or is it, well, it fits into my budget, so I can do it? You see, the example we see of true love here, and it's not always financial either. Let me say that, because it can be time, right? Like, we have so many hours in the week. Many people's lives are filled throughout that week with stuff that they have to do, or job-related, or family responsibility, or home responsibility, whatever it may be. They're filled up. And in order to add something to that mix, you have to sacrifice something else. Like, you can't add another hour to the day. You don't suddenly get to say there's 25 hours. You got to figure out. When you think about coming to church, in some cases it's a sacrifice because your days are filled with stuff and you have to sacrifice time in order to do that, especially if it's something outside of, because we should set aside Sunday and hopefully Wednesday to be a time that we do go to church, but especially Sunday, right? We should set aside that time. But if we think about time outside of that window, Monday through Saturday, sometimes it's a sacrifice in order to do that. And are we willing to make that sacrifice? And we can't look at it for just our benefit, because when we gather together, it's not just only for us. Like, there's a benefit for other people when we come together, right? The fellowship we talk about. There's also a benefit if we have children or grandchildren and we bring them with us, then there's a benefit for them that goes along with that as well. So we have to think about that. Am I willing to sacrifice something that I maybe had planned or was going to do, because now I see there's a need for me to do something else. And that's the display of love that we see here in verse 16, is that God didn't have to send his son down, but he loved the world, he loved the people so much and the world that he did send his son down, and it was a sacrifice on his part. Now the son agreed somewhere along the way. God didn't say, okay, you're going and you don't have any say in this, right? Christ agreed to go. And we find that on display when he's in the garden right before his arrest, and he actually prays, God, if there's any other way, but if not, I'm going to do your will. So we find his agreement with God's will. And somewhere along the way, he agreed to do that. The question would be, like when we throw around this whole, love you, what are we willing to do for someone that we tell that to? Are we willing to sacrifice? Or are we just trying to say, hey, I kind of like you? Because there's a difference, isn't there? There is. All right, based on Romans 5:8, what was the timing of this love that God showed? And Miss Billy Faye's already hit on that. I don't know if she looked it up first or just remembered it, but before we were ever reconciled to him, he decided to show his love toward us. And in Romans 5:8, it actually says, but God showed his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So the timing is not, now again, we're taking this into our life today. The timing is not, I'm willing to sacrifice for someone after they've done something for me. The example we see here from God is that I'm willing to sacrifice before I ever see them make any step toward accepting me. I'm doing the sacrifice now. Because if we get something in return, is it really a sacrifice? It's kind of a swap of goods or services, right? It's kind of like when you go to Walmart. You give them money, they give you some stuff in return. Not much. Smaller stuff than what it used to be, but but they do give you stuff in return. So that's not a sacrifice. Sacrifice is when we do something we don't expect it in return, or we don't even know if they will, but that doesn't matter. We just do it. And that's a sign of, one way that we show love anyway. Any questions on that or comments on that? All right, question 2 then. Was the love that God showed toward the world something that the world needed, or was it something that he wanted to do? Okay. Look at verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life.
I think it's something the world needed. If the world didn't need it, I don't know that he would have done it.
Okay. Do we sometimes show love? You're right. Like, what would be the need?
Okay,
Don't let it go to your head, Mary.
Kevin, turn the calendar back a little bit, back to when he first destroyed the earth with the water. I don't know how many, I've heard people speculate on how many people were on this planet that drowned during that time, and, Noah and his family. And then you come on up to what you're talking about right now, and I guess God looked and said, I'm not going to do that again.
Well, he said it, actually said it right after the flood, right? Because he gave the rainbow.
God don't. You think he second-guessed his decision to do that the first time?
No, I think it is. It's hard for our human mind to comprehend a God that we can't, with a human mind, comprehend. So we're all speculating on stuff like that, but I think God looked into the future. I mean, if you go back to the fall of Adam and Eve, and you remember what they said, that at some point, and I'll get the word wrong, but at some point, Christ was going to crush Satan. Let's just go back to it. Bruise head and heel, and I always get that mixed up how I say it. This is why I don't quote scripture very much. So it's in chapter 3.
Number 15, is it?
Yes, verse 15 of chapter 3 of Genesis. It says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. And then you have this statement, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So he shall bruise your head. What happened to Christ's head?
They put the thorns on it.
Crown of thorns on it. He was also beaten, which wasn't necessarily his head, it was across his back, theoretically. But then, you shall bruise his heel. Is he talking about Christ when he says, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel? Again, it gets back to kind of what Don brought up. Who's the he, right? He shall bruise your head means Christ will bruise Satan's head. And you shall bruise his heel means Christ is basically going to stomp you out. So from the very beginning, he had the redemption plan of Christ. Now, you get to Noah's time, and that wasn't the time for it to occur. Everyone had become evil except Noah and his family. Thankfully, that wasn't the case necessarily from that point on. There appears to be, didn't get to that shape. That's why we talk about how terrible the world is today. We really have no idea how terrible it was when Noah lived. Because he was the only ones that were found to be righteous.
But when God made the earth and he looked at everything, he said, this is good. When you get over to John 3:16, he said, God so loved the world.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I don't know that we.
difference between good and love.
I don't know that we can comprehend the amount of sorrow that God has had after his creation. A world that he loved, what did he do to it? He flooded the whole thing. And then we find that he comes back here and he sends his son to die for it. It's hard for us to comprehend. Again, a human mind trying to comprehend an almighty God, and we just can't do that. Going back to question 2, was the love that God showed toward the world something that the world needed, or was it something that he wanted to do?
Who's he?
God.
God, Jesus.
God
God the Father.
God the Father, yeah. So, have you ever done something for someone to show them love, but it wasn't what they really needed? I'm going to use this example, which may not affect the lives here, but you've probably seen it somewhere in the world. Take a family, mom and dad, that's dealing with a child that's a drug addict. And they try everything in the world to get them help, worldly ways to get them help, because they do love them. And so they're supplying things that they think will help them, but it's not what they truly need. What is it that they truly need? They need God in their life, right? Changed heart. Do we ever find ourselves trying to show love towards someone in a way that they truly don't need, but it's our effort to do that? The reason I ask that is God knew exactly what we needed, and he showed his love by giving us exactly what we needed, and that was someone that could redeem our soul. So how should this affect the way that we show love toward others? Should we just randomly do things out of love? Mary, you want to tackle that one?
Nope, you done told me I was right, I'm gonna stop that.
No.
That's what she said.
Or we randomly,
Should you randomly just do things for people to show them love?
Maybe you should give them what they need.
I think if it's laid on your heart, maybe that person is looking for something and you just happen to be the one there, and then if the Lord lays it on your heart, that may eventually lead them to what they need.
Okay?
I think you ought to pray about it, feel if that's what you need, and if you're not feeling that, then it's probably not something they need.
Mhm.
Yeah, because we can easily become an enabler.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who knows exactly what they need? So if we don't approach the Lord and we just randomly do it ourselves, are we acting out of our wisdom or out of God's? Yeah. So when we look here, like God knew exactly what we needed. We needed a redeemer, so he sent a redeemer. Mary's, I hate to say this twice, Mary was right.
Wow.
Twice in one day. She threw in that language of, I forget exactly how you said it, but if we are led to do it, if we're led to do it, then it's something that probably is coming from God. If we're following the Holy Spirit now, then it's something that's probably coming from God, and God knows their need, and maybe, as she said, we're the ones that provide it. But sometimes we just go out without thinking about what God would want us to do, and we just kind of start doing some things, and it's not necessarily what they may need. And then, someone said it, we could become an enabler of something. You've seen this the same as I have. People go out, some people go out, not all, some people go out on Facebook and they say, my kid's going to play travel sports. Would you support them this year? Do we ever go to the Lord in prayer and ask about that before we do it? Because we could be enabling something.
Could be enabling them to miss church.
Could be. Could be leading them down a path that shows them sports is more important than church. It could be the right thing to do. I'm not saying it's always wrong. I'm just saying, do we approach God and pray about it before we do it? Or do we just say, you know, I like that kid, I'm going to support him? Key is, like, we need God's guidance through every decision we make in life. Even if we're going to show love to someone else, we need God's wisdom for the right love to be shown. Because we can do something that's interpreted by the world to be love, but it may not be what they need, and it could lead them down a path that's not good. So we have to like go to someone that has better wisdom than us to determine those things. Does that make sense?
there are sometimes that though, this helping someone or showing love is instantaneous. Someone drowning in the
Sure.
water,
Yeah.
accident, and
Yeah, I would appreciate it if I happen to be drowning and you're standing there. I would hope you wouldn't go into like a 15-minute prayer about whether I should be. Yeah. Yeah. Don's right.
I hope Tina's not the one on the shore.
No doubt.
I'm gonna say it's gonna take a little bit.
Yeah.
the sacrifice is, you think, I might reach that, I can't swim, but I might get something and stick out there or reach out there or something, even though it may be hard on you, or it may cost your life.
I know a guy that his son was drowning, and he couldn't swim, and he went out after his son, and they both drowned. You know,
That's
I think you're right, though. You think, because I mean, I love our kids at church. They're my family, you know. I love my nephews, and yes, I support stuff, and I don't always look to God. I want to help them. But you're right. You're totally right, because I wouldn't want to be that stumbling block for them to not be in church or not be where they need to be and just be going through the world, not searching for God themselves, I guess. So.
You know, these are questions that as a church, when people, and y'all know that people reach out for help in ways, and sometimes it's a true need, sometimes they're trying to take advantage of the system. And we have all kinds. There are some that are true needs, and I'm not trying to discount that at all. And we want to help those that are true needs. But somehow we have to discern. And so the same decisions you make individually are the same decisions we have to make as a church when people reach to the church and say, I need help in this. Okay, is this really going to help you in life, or is it something that I'm going to enable you to continue doing that doesn't help you in life at all? And so we do have to make those decisions. Those are hard decisions sometimes. And I'm not saying that, don't take this as I'm saying that sports is wrong. I don't want you to leave with that. I'm just saying we need to approach someone that has greater wisdom than us to make those decisions. And many times we just make the decision. Now, in a drowning situation, I hope you'll at least throw a rope out or something, Tina.
But a lot of times, that's just like this verse.
Yeah.
You need to throw that rope out. It may not be a drowning situation, it may be just a life situation. And people are drowning out there every day and dying, going to hell. And you need to throw something out there. If it's, God bless you, and if I can help you, talk to you or whatever, or share the Bible with you, or pray for you, let me know.
There's an interesting song that I found. It's by a guy that I don't know where he stands in life in terms of spirituality. But it's an interesting song. Mercy Me, if you've ever heard of the group Mercy Me, actually does it with him. The title of the song is named Craig. That's it, Craig. And it is written from the perspective, looking at the words, it's written from the perspective of someone that goes into church, is not a Christian, doesn't want to be there, and he meets this guy named Craig. And he actually makes a statement in the words of the song. Craig speaks about judgment, but he was not judgmental. And then he goes on talking about his life, and he gets to a point where, and I don't know if he's talking about himself or not, but he loses income, and his family's in bad shape. They had to cut back to one vehicle, and it was a hardship. And this guy named Craig shows up with a vehicle that he gives to him. And the guy at first won't accept it. And he says, look, man, someone done this for me, let me do it for you. And in the song, he actually says, I hadn't figured out church yet, but I do get Craig. And he says, Craig can't walk on water. He can't part the sea. He can't turn the water into, how's it go? Yeah. Anyway, he talks about, he can't do the things that Christ does, but yet he may be really close with Christ. And I get him. I hadn't figured this whole church thing out yet. Now, I'm not saying it's the greatest song, but it goes along with what Don said. Sometimes people need to see us acting out of love, especially if we're in tune with God and God says, hey, you need to stop and have this conversation with somebody. Because the guy actually says in the song, hey, I'm praying for you would have been okay. But instead, he brought me a car and gave it to me. And, sometimes we can find ourselves maybe guilty of just doing the, hey, I'll pray for you thing, when in reality, we need to do the sacrifice thing and show love in a way that maybe we weren't going to before. So it's just interesting that you bring that up.
Over our lesson in Sunday school, it was about money and coveting and stuff. And I was telling Chandra that those young girls in there, they know a lot more sometimes, have it figured out better than us adults, because one of the girls spoke up and she said that, it's good the more money you have if you're doing the right things with it. She said, I don't think having money is a bad thing. She said, and I think there's a lot of people that have money that give to a whole lot of things probably that people don't know about. She says, but unless it's affecting their life, that they're giving up something to give, she says, then I'm not so sure they're following God's will for how he has prospered them. And it's very true. I mean, I think a lot of people do give, including myself, but it's what you can do without. But what about giving up something that we really, truly could give up to give?
I'm sure it would have been a whole lot. God might have enjoyed that 33-year period of time more if his son would have been with him but instead he sent him down here. And they were in contact, but not the same as them sitting side by side in the throne room or whatever.
Life change.
It did.
A lot of times we give and our lives never change. We never miss a coffee,
Right.
whatever from it. But
Right.
our lives are still just the way they were. We didn't give up anything to give what we gave or do what we did.
That's a great point.
And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, yeah, that's true.
All right, question 3. From verse 16, what does it mean to believe?
You know, Brother Kevin, it says, whosoever believeth in. There's a lot, I think, involved in this word in. Believeth in him, believeth in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Believe in him as Lord and Savior and as Christ. It don't say whosoever believes about him,
Right,
who believes in him.
right.
It made me think of a gentleman not long ago I had a conversation with, and he said, I believe in God, but he didn't claim to be a Christian.
Yeah. He believes he exists.
Yeah.
Same way as Satan believes he exists. He has to believe he existed, right? He went and tempted him. He knows he exists, but he believes what he knows too. He went and tempted him, so he knows that he's there, believes that he's there, but he doesn't believe in him, like you said. And we have to, be careful, because there are verses we can use if we want to and take them out of context and just say, well, if you just believe, then you're okay. And we know that not to be true when we really look at Scripture. So we have to be careful how we look at this word believe, because you can take this verse and you can say, well, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. So if I just believe in him without really identifying what in him means, then we can really have a false belief.
You can substitute follow.
Follow, you can substitute that. There was another word that I had read that you could substitute as well, and I can't remember now what it was, but basically meaning that your whole life is involved in him. And believing means everything about me is about him now. It's not about me anymore. It's not what I believe I can do. It's what I believe he can do. And so it's a shift from me to him is what it is. From question 4, from verse 16, what does perish mean? Should not perish but have eternal life. Say it again.
Never die like the separate hill,
Okay.
never perish that way.
Right.
When God says, depart from me, I never knew you.
What will hell be? What?
Hell.
Terrible, she said.
Oh, I thought you said hell.
It will be terrible. Yeah.
Torment, you will be tormented.
Tormented. What makes it terrible?
Separation from God is
Yes,
going to
that's
be
it, right there,
major.
separation.
That's where I was wanting to get. Perish in him should not perish but have eternal life. Perish would be an eternity without God.
No hope.
And we really don't know what that's like right now. We've never experienced a time when God was not actively working around us. We may not have been believing in him. We may not have been turning to him for the wisdom that we've talked about, the guidance, all that. But we've never experienced a time where God was not active all around us. But an eternity in hell is the absence of God acting on your behalf. We have no idea what that's like. And so this word perish, when I look at that word perish, what I typically think about is like fruit that has come off a tree and you got it in a basket and it's kind of, it's got a perish date. That's usually what I think about. It goes bad. Well, it's going to be bad. But it's going to be the absence of anything good. All right, question 5 then. From verse 17, what did God not do? And why did he not do this? Should we do this?
He didn't spare his son.
Okay, he didn't spare his son. That's true. He didn't come to condemn the world. He didn't send his son to condemn the world. Why did he not do that?
The world was already condemned.
Yeah. That's what we don't think about very much, is that we're already condemned. Nothing has to happen for that to take place. It's already happened. The fall of man, going back that we looked at in Genesis, man was condemned from that point going forward. So God didn't have to do anything to condemn. It was already that way. The last part of question 5, should we do this? Now that I ask that from the standpoint of, should we look at people and condemn them?
No, if it wasn't for the grace of God, we could be where they're at.
We were where they were. Do we do it?
Yeah, we more apt to condemn or show them our love.
Probably, now, we have to talk about condemnation, right? Because it's in the Bible. We have to talk about judgment. All those things we all need to know. Those are things that will occur without a belief in Christ. But God didn't have to do anything to condemn the world. We don't have to point out to people that they're condemned. Now, there is a knowledge we have to carry of from the fall of mankind, we became condemned. And because of our choices to go against God's will, we are condemned. But I don't have to stand here and point out everything about the individual that would condemn them.
Don't you think they already know?
Some don't, I don't think, because they're not where we are. They don't know right from wrong, because they've not seen the right always.
I would say it depends on if they have been in the presence of light or not. And we'll read that in just a minute. But light exposes darkness. Without the presence of light, does darkness know it's dark? Which then puts the onus back upon those who are bearers of light, that we have to bear the image of light in order for darkness to be uncovered.
And
And
just because you're a Christian doesn't mean there's not gonna be life struggles all the way through that. Jesus, 33 years on this planet, being the Son of God, look at the struggles he went through in this world. And then be sacrificed on the cross.
Well, even one
Something he created.
even one further than that, an individual that was just a human that wasn't Son of God, but had an extremely important role, and that's John the Baptist, and he was beheaded merely because he done what God wanted him to do. And the reason I brought up a minute ago, like we have to be the light bearer. If we don't bear light in the right way, do we truly expose darkness as it should be? We can run around all day and say that we're Christian, but if we're not bearing the light, are we really? Because here's what has happened in some situations, and I will say, and we should own up to this, that this happens in churches. We become more condemners than we do light bearers. And when we become more of a condemner than a light bearer, then we're doing something that God himself didn't even do. Now, he will do at Judgment Day, right? But God sent the one that could bear the light and gave us the opportunity to reflect that light to other people. So we have to be careful that instead of just, well, we have to be careful that that we not become people that are condemning toward others, but we do share truth about the Bible. And there's a fine line there on how that is done. Because we do have to share that there is a heaven and a hell. We do have to share that there is a judgment. We do have to share that there is, actions that are not pleasing unto God. But it's not our place to condemn them. And we do have to disciple them. And sometimes discipling them means that we have to bring their attention to, hey, there's a better way to live your life than what you're doing right now.
You know, when we witness, I think people can tell if we're talking to them because we're concerned about them, because we love them, or if we're just letting them know, I'm better than you,
That's right. That's exactly right. If there's a concern in our voice for them, or their family, or whoever it may be, or if we're being,
the Bible mentions hell, so I can say, but, we tell somebody, if you don't get your act together, you're going straight to hell. I'd be better off if I never said anything to them.
That's true, that's true.
yeah. Now we can say, that same message can be delivered, but in a way that is loving, and it'll go a lot further. All right, question, are we on 6? Based on verses 16, 17, should there be times that we have to be uncomfortable in order for others to know how to be saved? Do you think Christ was uncomfortable? Do you think God was uncomfortable? He went 33 years without, I know they were in communication. I'm not saying that they were not, but not the same as Christ being sitting there beside him, at the right hand of God. Are we willing to be uncomfortable? The word should gets thrown around a lot, doesn't it? We should be, but are we?
That's another sacrifice you have to make too.
Kind of goes back to that, to truly show love, we have to sacrifice. So if we truly show, because what's the greatest thing we can give anyone? The message of the gospel, right? Like we can't make them accept Christ, but we can share with them the gospel. Like you said, that's the greatest gift I can give you, is that. Now I can't make you accept it, but I can sure put it in front of you. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. You ever heard people say, it's just, and it's hard to talk to family about Christ, about where they are.
The big thing is, if you do that, some people say, well, you're being judgmental. And that's the biggest cop-out right there with someone you're witnessing to. If you cross any ground there that even gives a hint of judgmental,
Right.
you're just judging me.
It's, and we can use those things for reasons not to do it. But if we do it in the way that God would want us to, if we're truly being led, as Mary said, then we can't let the fear of how they're going to interpret, if we're doing it right, we can't let the fear of what they're going to say keep us from doing it.
But it's like we said, family is, it's really hard. When my dad first went in the nursing home, I wanted to make sure his life was right with God before, because he was getting dementia, and I didn't want it to get past that point. And I just could not find it in me to ask him. Well, Natalie's dad is my dad's best friend, and he's a preacher, and so we discussed it. She went to her dad, and he went and talked to my dad. But if it hadn't been for that, I wonder if I could have even approached him with it. I know I should have, but it's just something about it being your family that you just are, I don't know, scared or nervous.
I think it's not that you're scared, I think that they see you for what you really are. They've been with you your whole life, and they've watched you make mistakes. And they can throw that up to you, and it's easier just to not say something.
So we may have to own up to some of our failures in the past if we approach them. That's interesting. You know, we talk about that our family is who we love the most. And we talk about that true show of love is actually to sacrifice. So are we willing to sacrifice for our family? And typically this is not like our kids typically, right? Because we'll talk to our kids about it. But this may be like an uncle or an aunt or a mom or a dad. And we hide behind that. Like, I don't want to break the relationship because every family reunion I'm going to have to sit across the table from them. Or every Christmas I'm going to have to see them. But what's the greatest thing you can give them? The message of the gospel. It does require us to be uncomfortable. But we're not near as uncomfortable as what Christ was. And I don't think he's ever asked us to be as uncomfortable as what he was. Question 7, do we have to do anything bad to be condemned? We've kind of already answered that, right? We're already condemned. How are we condemned? And condemned to what? And if we fail to believe, does that cause us to be condemned? So, how are we condemned?
By accepting Jesus Christ.
We're condemned
We're condemned
until we do.
right.
Okay. What led, though, to us being condemned?
Fall of Adam and Eve.
Do we put it all on them?
Our own problems too.
I mean, you look at a child when they first grew up, is that child's immediate response that they're going to do everything their parent wants them to do?
The first word's no.
A lot of times, first word is no.
It wasn't me, I didn't do it.
Yeah. So we find within us, like we're born into that condemnation, and we can't blame Adam and Eve because we still make choices for ourselves, too. You know, the kid that you tell the stove's hot, and what do they do at some point in time? To either touch it or they walk up to it and look at you, right? You ever have one do that? I know you have. They look at you and they're about to do it and they would just want to see what you're going to say. So if we fail to believe, does that cause us to be condemned? If we fail to believe, does it cause us to be condemned?
Keeps you condemned.
It keeps you condemned because we're already condemned, right? Question 8, why do people love darkness rather than light? I'm kind of moving quick because why do people love darkness rather than light? When we look in the mirror in a well-lit room, what do we see?
See all your mistakes.
You see everything about us, right? You walk into a bathroom that's well-lit, look in the mirror, you see every flaw that's there, right? I wasn't going to go that far, but
I'm a lot better looking person when I look in the mirror and it's dark.
which is kind of what we're talking about here.
That's why we have filters on pictures now.
If the room that the mirror's in is kind of dark, we look a little better, don't we? What if it's completely dark? We don't see anything wrong.
We'll see what we want to see.
Is it wrong? If the room's dark and the mirror's there, we can't see it in the mirror, but we still walk up and stand in front of it, is it still wrong?
Still what it is.
It's still what it is. It's kind of like the old question of, if a tree falls in the woods, do you hear if nobody's there?
Sin is sin whether
Tree still falls, right? It still makes noise.
it can be seen by others. It's still sin.
It's still sin. So here's where it becomes now, okay, how does the darkness get exposed? And where does the light come from? Ultimately, Jesus Christ. But how is it spread now in this world? So we have to be willing to bear the light. So if I walk in and I have a little bit of light, what happens to the darkness around me?
You adjust to it.
They see a few things that they may need to change. Maybe their language needs to change. What if they walk into a completely lit up room? Do they see everything that needs to change? And ultimately, they see why it needs to change. Because we're now bearing light from someone else, because they can look at us and they can see all the faults. Chandra kind of mentioned that a minute ago. They can see all the faults that they want, but yet we're still bearing a light that's not of us. But if we're only carrying a little bit of that light, all we're doing is identifying a few things that needs to be changed in that mirror. We're not identifying the whole thing that needs to be changed. There's nothing about started trying to reach out to people that we just knew that had drifted out of church. They were one of them. Sent them a text every Sunday morning inviting them to Sunday school. Went on for a long period of time. He finally started coming. She didn't. She was the one that was actually raised in church, but he started coming. And he rededicated his life. And over the course of time, they got their finances in shape because they were in a terrible, terrible spot. They are now leading some devotional classes at a church in Jonesboro. They're just active. They got married. I should have thrown that in there. They got married. Realized that they should have. Both got married. Anyway, doing really well. About 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was before COVID, so however long it was, he sent me a message one day out of the blue. And he said, I want to thank you. He said, I really didn't like you when you were sending me all those texts. He said, you made me feel bad every Sunday. He said, I really didn't like you. He said, but you were doing it, and because you kept doing it, I ended up getting where I am today. That was because of God. He got where he is today. It's not because of me. But I really didn't know that he didn't like me. If I would have known that, I don't know if I would have went forward with it or not. But he didn't. And maybe that was the reason God didn't let me know until later. I don't know. Because I needed to learn a valuable lesson that you keep doing it no matter what. It is going to put us in some difficult spots sometimes. Thankfully, I was able to see like the end result of that, which helped me grow. Because I realized that we do have to keep doing that. Even if it does make people upset in the moment. I'm not saying that sending the text is always the right answer. But we still have to keep reaching out to them. And so don't get discouraged just because it may be uncomfortable. Realize Christ was extremely uncomfortable when he came to this earth. And he done it because he sacrificed to show a great love toward you and toward me. Let me pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today. We thank you for this time, but we thank you for